सह वीर्यङ्करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। ॐ आप्यायन्तु ममाङ्गानि वाक्प्राणश्चक्षुश्रोत्रमथो बलमिन्द्रियाणि च सर्वाणि। सर्वं ब्रह्म उपनिषदं माहं ब्रह्म निराकुर्यां मा ब्रह्म निराकरोद। निराकरणमस्त्वनिराकरणं मेस्तु तदात्मनि निरतेय उपनिषत्सु धर्मास्ते मयि सन्तु ते मयि सन्तु। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः।
We will begin with chanting of Kenopanishad.
केनेषितं पतति प्रेषितं मनः केन प्राणः प्रथमः प्रैतियुक्तः। केनेषितां वाचमिमां वदन्ति चक्षुश्रोत्रं कौ देवो युनक्ति। श्रोत्रस्य श्रोत्रं मनसो मनो यद्वाचोह वाचगो स प्राणस्य प्राणः। चक्षुषश्चक्षुरतिमुच्य धीरा प्रेत्यास्माल्लोकादमृता भवन्ति। न तत्र चक्षुर्गच्छति न वाग्गच्छति नो मनो न विद्मो न विजानीमो यथैतदनुशिष्यात्। अन्यदेव तद्विदितादथो अविदितादधि इति शुश्रुमपूर्वेषां येनस्तद्व्याचचक्षिरे। यद्वाचानभ्युदितं येन वागभ्युद्यते तदेव ब्रह्मत्वं विद्धि नेदं यदिदमुपासते। यन्मनसा न मनुते येनाहुर्मनो मतम् तदेव ब्रह्मत्वं विद्धि नेदं यदिदमुपासते। यच्चक्षुषा न पश्यति येन चक्षुगोषि पश्यति तदेव ब्रह्मत्वं विद्धि नेदं यदिदमुपासते। यच्छ्रोत्रेण न शृणोति येन श्रोत्रमिदगो श्रुतम् तदेव ब्रह्मत्वं विद्धि नेदं यदिदमुपासते। यत्प्राणेन न प्राणिति येन प्राणः प्रणीयते तदेव ब्रह्मत्वं विद्धि नेदं यदिदमुपासते।
The question asked in the first mantra is about the power which makes the ear hear, the eyes see, the mind fall on the object, the pranas function, and the speech to speak. The answer given in the second mantra is very interesting, that it uses the same words as it is used in the question. In other words, the master puts back the answer to the student with the same terms that he used to indicate that the answer is hidden in the question itself. It's a very interesting construction of thought flow here. And we discussed in the last class that this is the right method of education. This method of education is to make the disciple derive the answer. It is not spoon-fed. Obviously, this is Upanishad, and you know the caliber of the student who has reach the master to learn the Upanishad. But more important is to follow the methodology here that the answerer, which is the master here, uses the terms and terminologies which is known to the student. So the unknown entity has to be explained in known terms. This is probably the outstanding contribution of the Upanishad vis-a-vis any other source of knowledge which in the modern world people talk about God in terms of equally unknown term, which could be correct but which is not useful to the seeker in terms of movement forward. When you say God in terms of infinite power and infinite mercy, etc., it is all correct. But infinite is a unknown entity. Infinite is not conceivable by the intellect. So it doesn't take the student forward. What the master says here is, the question is, what is it that makes the ears hear? What is it that makes the mind function? Answer is, it is the ear of the ear. It is the mind of the mind. It is the eye of the eye. It is the prana of the prana. It is the speech of the speech. That's all. The answer is over. Now it's a very fascinating answer. But if a person were to take up this and read per se, it doesn't make any sense. The question, it's as though he is begging the question, which is not so. See, he is asking what is it that makes the ears function. He is saying it is the ear of the ear. So carefully note the translation in the book later when you study. We have that advantage in the English that there is a capital letter and small letter. Throughout Vedanta treatise also you will find this word Atma, which means the self, is sometimes used with small s and sometimes used with capital S. The capital S refers to the Supreme Self, which is the God. The small s refers to individual self, which is the Jivatma. Individual self equals the Supreme Self plus body, mind, intellect. This is a formula. Of course, we are not getting into that now. The point is, there is a difference when you use the word self. So, while writing commentary, it has been very carefully maintained that in some places, self is used with small s and in some places it is used with capital S. In this particular mantra, the same formula is used when he is differentiating between two ears. So when the master says that it is the ear of the ear, Shrotrasya Shrotram. Shrotrasya Shrotram means ear of the ear. In the English, when you write the first ear in capital and of the ear in small. If you want to put that in Sanskrit, it is the reverse here, because the construction in Sanskrit is like this. Shrotrasya means of the ear. Shrotram means ear. It is, those who are interested in grammar, it is called what is that clause called? Possessive clause. Possessive case. There are 8 cases, right? In that 8 cases, that is possessive case. Possessive means, in English, how you write as apostrophe S. His car means, car is the possession and he is the possessor. So when you write, he becomes his. Rama's car, you say. That means car of Rama. So this is ear's ear. So ear of the ear. Of the ear is Shrotrasya and capital ear is Shrotram. So of the small ear, this is the capital ear. That means the real answer to the question is to find out the real ear. He is asking what is it that makes this ear hear. He is saying, try to find out the real ear which is inside somewhere, and that is what you are looking for. Sir, if I ask you, do you hear? You will say yes. How are you hearing?
By the ear.
By the ear. Through this ear you are hearing. Just for argument's sake, this ear is cut off. Okay, so what you show as ear outside is not there. And still, my sound reaches you and you are saying that you are able to hear. So that means what we see as fleshy organ outside is not the real ear. It is there, but this is not the real ear. So if the membrane, this is called as pinna. In English this is called as pinna in biology. Inside the ear there are some membranes which vibrate to make you listen to the sound. I think it's called tympanic membrane. There are some minutest bones and other things are there, and there's a membrane there. If that membrane is intact, if this is not there also, you are able to hear something. Suppose if that membrane is ruptured, even then not fully ruptured, it's somewhat there. So something you are able to hear, or you are able to say, what you are able, then if that person shouts loud, you are able to register something. Okay, so even if the membrane is ruptured, you are able to listen to something. Or if there is a substitute which is given by the doctor, assume that there is a machine which is able to substitute for that membrane and you are able to plug it in here, whatever is the sound outside is carried inside through that. That means, can you say, what is your ear? My ear is there. You cannot say, ear is somewhere here only. Suppose if that machine you have and that machine is kept there, where is your ear means you can't say, there is my ear. Ear is here only. So that machine is able to help you hear that noise. But that is not the real ear. Just as this membrane is not the real ear. Just as this pinna is not the real ear. These are all required for the sound to travel inside, no doubt about it. But can you say this is the real ear? No. Go a little deeper inside. You are here and your membrane is not ruptured. This is all right. But the mind is caught up somewhere else. You are suddenly thinking whether you park the car right or is it in the no parking area. Suddenly some thought comes like that. So you are totally preoccupied in that thought. And we are talking about Upanishad here. Nothing of it goes inside. So your ears are open. Your mind is not here. Your physical body is here. This ear is here. Sound is traveling. Frequency is all there happening within the ears. Everything is there. But you are not hearing or you are not listening. So what is the real here? The mind. The mind is the real ear. Okay? Mind is the real ear. The sense center which is there in the mind is what makes you hear. There is a registration. Okay. We have drawn this diagram before. Just remember this. There is a mind. There are 5 senses for us. So these are all sense centers. The stimuli comes from the outside world and reaches the sense centers. This is, let us say, sound. This is sight. This is touch. This is taste. This is smell. This is the world. The world is made up of these 5 sense stimuli. The sound goes through the ear. The sight goes through the eye. The touch goes through the skin, through the tongue, and then smell goes through the nose. So the sound from outside goes through the ear and when it gets registered in the sense center, then only the perception is registered. If the mind is not there, a very common example is when you are sleeping, then sound is there, you don't hear because the mind is not there. So each and every stimulus, it has to go through the respective sense organ and then it gets registered in the mind in the respective sense center, then it gets registered as a perception. So we seem to somewhat derive here that the real ear is not somewhere outside, it is somewhere inside, and we have come up to the level of the mind now. Mind has various things, among this sense center is also one function. Emotions and various other things are there, we are not going into it now. It says it's the sense center. So can we now say the mind is the real ear? Yes? Safna. What he says is,
intellect will become your.
huh?
As you move ahead, the intellect will become your.
Real ear. Okay. In this mantra he says, Shrotrasya Shrotram, ear of the ear. Next he says, mind of the mind. It is the mind of the mind. That means, suppose if the mind was the real ear, it controls everything, it is the thing that is making the ears hear and it is sort of an independent entity. The mind must automatically function by itself. Does that happen? The mind really cannot function as though by itself, because you go to the other areas of the mind, you want the mind to think of something. When you are sitting in the puja room, you want to think of God. Mind doesn't go automatically there. You want to do it. Okay? Your mind only wants to do it. Or you think of some fear and you say the mind should not go to that fear. But mind goes always there. Today I must not be late. I must not be late means it will be automatically late. You will be. Mind, you must. Then we say don't think of being late. Okay, I will not think of being late. In that process you are thinking of being late. So the mind automatically goes to areas where you yourself don't want to go. That means mind seems to operate by somebody else. That is within you only, because it's your mind after all. So when you take the sound principle, it is no doubt reaching the mind, but you are not aware of the sound unless otherwise you are actually conscious of it. So the mind itself must be conscious of something to get it registered. If the mind is conscious, why do we say that the mind is not here? That means the mind is conscious of something else. The mind is conscious of your car, or the mind is conscious of, you are hearing the AC sound? Yes, the mind is conscious of the AC sound. The mind is conscious of somebody who comes late. Suddenly you all turn this side. What happens there? Mind is conscious of that. So the mind itself registers something only when the consciousness, or in kun, that attention is directed towards that particular object. In fact, the term mind itself, if you analyze here carefully, what is mind? Mind is nothing but flow of thoughts. Flow of thoughts is called mind. There is a continuous flow of thought. This is the definition of the mind. Mind is like a movie screen, continuously certain things are moving. The film is moving, and that is what is the mind. At any one point of time, if you are able to arrest it, it is in one particular object. But you are not able to arrest, therefore there is a continuous movement. Whatever your consciousness is directed to, that is the picture you have in the mind. Think about it. Whatever is the consciousness that you are directing to, that is the picture that you have in the mind. Suppose I say, think of apple, means mind goes to apple. Correct? That means at that point of time, you are conscious of apple. This is called as conditioned consciousness. So in your mind, the picture of apple comes, that's called as mind, because the consciousness is directed towards that particular object. So beyond the mind, what is it that makes the mind function is the consciousness. So which is the real ear here? Consciousness. So how another way that we can just derive this is, he is saying, if you take the sense centers as the real ear, the sense center of the eye is different, the sense center of the ear is different. The sense center of the nose is different, and all these things are different. But he is saying, Shrotrasya Shrotram Manaso Mano Yat. That which, yat, singular, That means there is only one thing. He is asking the question. We said that there is a slight confusion arising in the student's mind when he asked that question, because he has done the homework. We went through it very elaborately. He has understood the personality layers. He has seen the panchakoshas, but he is confused as to how they are functioning. What is it that makes it function? Whether they are independent or whether there is a God allotted to each of them. So he is asking, what makes the eye function? What makes the ear hear? What makes the mind alight on the object? Is it the same power or is it a different power? Do we classify all of them differently? In Greek and all, they say gods for everything. It's just various gods who are functioning, and is there a controlling God who is controlling all of them, or all of them independent? This also could be taken as an extensive portion of his doubt. But the answer comes very clear. Shrotrasya shrotram manaso mano yat vachoha vachagam pranasya pranaha chakshusha chakshu. Eye of the eye, prana of the prana, mind of the mind, ear of the ear, etc. Yat, that which means it is singular. It is a singular entity which makes the eye see. It is that same singular entity which makes the ear hear. It is the same singular entity which makes the prana function. It is the same singular entity which makes the mind alight on the objects and the speech speak. That singular entity refers to ultimately the consciousness. That means you go through any of the organs that is given there, ultimately you have to hit at the same consciousness. If you go through the ear and you go through all the fleshy organs and membrane and sense center and all those things, finally it has to reach the same consciousness, pure consciousness inside. You go through the eye, it's same thing. This eye can get damaged, so you can put some other eye here. And you go through a nerve, you go through brain, whatever you go through, and finally come to the sense center. Finally, you are conscious of the sight. So ultimately, the real eye is connecting to the pure consciousness inside. So the question ultimately boils down to, in general language, who is God? What is God? That God is the real eye in you. The God is the real ear in you. The God is the real mind in you. The God is the real prana in you. The God is the real speech in you. Speech means all organs of action. Eyes and ears means all organs of perception. This is the style of the Upanishad, that they take one or two to collectively represent the whole. So, there is a organ of each and every part of our body which at present we are conscious of. If you are able to trace back that, you are reaching the pure consciousness inside, which is the real entity. So therefore, how are we to be aware of it? The answer is that cannot be aware of something. It is the very basic principle in you which is aware of everything else. That means the question ultimately boils down to the real ear or the real eye, real skin, real mind, whatever it is. It is the real subject in you. By definition, that real subject cannot be known. The real subject cannot be known. That is what he is going to say in the next mantra. Very beautiful mantra comes. 2, 3, this 2, 3, 4 and mantra, if you have captured these 3 mantras, we have captured the whole Upanishad. The Kenopanishad is essentially these 3 mantras. 2nd, 3rd and 4th. 2nd and 4th particularly. The real subject in you is God. The real subject in you cannot be known. See, suppose if I ask you, do you know your eye? You say, I know my eye, this is my eye. If I know something, it becomes an object of knowledge. Correct? The moment it is understood as an object of knowledge, it can no more be a subject. Now, subject is the knower. See, there are 3 entities: knower, known and knowledge. Knowledge is the transaction between the subject and object where you are able to understand. So, for knowledge to happen, there are these 2 entities. There is a subject and there is an object. All these entities, of course we can understand this fan as an object, this table as an object, everybody else for me is an object, that is clear. But when you come to your own personality, don't you know your I? Yes, I know my I. To that extent, I is not you, it is you who possess the I. That means somebody who is the possessor, and this possessed cannot be you, it is an object. Similarly, this is even understandable with reference to external organs, this body. It is very clear when you segregate this body, even at the time of death, it is very clear. But what we are not able to segregate and understand is, what about my mind inside? That mind inside is also not the real subject. It is also an instrument with which you are able to know everything else. See, you may not be exactly able to identify your mind by definition, but you all experience mind. You all experience mind, right? You all know the rules of the mind. Meaning, by study of Vedanta and other thing, we know how the mind functions. Mind has a tendency to go into the past and to the future. It will not be in the present. Mind has a tendency to worry. It has a tendency to be anxious about the future. And it is getting attached to the objects and beings. These are all the qualities of mind. These are all the laws of mind, rules of mind. This is universally applicable. Some persons may not know it, but with knowledge you can know it. And with knowledge then you can practice to how to get detached, etc. But this is the rule or laws pertaining to the mind. Similarly, there are rules and laws pertaining to your intellect, that it is a discriminating faculty, that it says this is black and this is white, that something in you says this is dharma and this is adharma. This is intellect. This is mind. This is intellect. Don't we understand this? Don't we conceive this? So to understand the rules and logics and the laws by which it functions, to that extent even the mind and intellect becomes the object. But the question arises, who knows this? Who knows this? I know it. That real I in you. Here I am talking about the capital I. Real I is the real I. EYEI also is the same I. Real I. The real I in you, which is beyond all conditioning, is called as the pure consciousness. This pure consciousness, when it combines with your thoughts, that becomes conditioned consciousness. All that we know now is conditioned consciousness. All that we know now is only conditioned consciousness. All that we know is this ear and the sounds that this ear hears. And we are colored by that. Then we say it's a good sound or bad sound or good sight or bad sight or even whatever, green color or blue color, everything that we see, everything that we experience, everything we understand as jealousy and other aspects of the mind, each and everything is nothing but a conditioned consciousness. If you are able to segregate that conditioning from the consciousness, if you are able to segregate the conditioning from the known entity of your thought flow, what remains is the pure consciousness. So therefore, the answer of the master actually leads the student towards understanding what that pure consciousness is. Obviously, this pure consciousness cannot be understood as a concept. That's what we are explaining now. If you understand anything as a concept, then it becomes another object in the world. That's all. It is not, Upanishad is not accepting that. Upanishad is saying, that is why in the next mantra is going to say, na vidmo na vijanimo. We don't know. And then he says, we don't know how to explain. It cannot be imparted, he says. It cannot be imparted. Very direct statement, he says. So, this first part is only revolving around these 5 objects, that 5 equipments that the student asked in the first question. He is centering around that only, nothing else. I mean, such a focused explanation is given. Like a somersault, you have to go turn around and understand this. So, the chart given in the book is very important here. That also you sort of mentally capture it. On the left hand side is given as the capital ear. On the right hand side is the small ear. The capital ear refers to the Supreme Self. The small ear refers to all the organs of perception, eyes, ears, nose, etc. The capital ear refers to the pure consciousness. The small ear refers to all the organs of action, hands, feet, speech, generative organ, and organ of evacuation. These are all called as the organs of action. The capital ear refers to the Atman inside. So, the Atman is the real subject inside. And pranas, vital air, etc., all this is the small ear, which is the functional equipment that we see. The capital ear refers to the Brahman. Brahman, Atman, these are all same. When it is individual, we use the word Atman. When it is totality, we use the term Brahman. But Atman is Brahman. Mind and intellect are your equipments. This capital ear is changeless. The Supreme Self within you is a changeless entity. The organs of perception, etc., are changing. Not just the stimuli from the world that changes, even your hearing ability changes, even what you like in the mind changes, even what you think as concept and ideologies change. The change is slow, but it changes. Many people are caught up in ideology of communism when they are very young. Then they later change their ideology to capitalism. Then they change their ideology to RSS, or they change their ideology to something else. These are all ideologies. Ideologies also are not fixed. They also are subject to change. Your intellect is subject to change. What you like as a particular person, you don't like that person later on. What you like as a particular fruit, you don't like later on. A particular color, you don't like or you like. This also changes. Mind changes. Your likes and dislikes are in a constant flux of change. Your perceptions change. Everything changes. But there is a changeless entity inside you. This changeless entity inside you is recognizable by one formula, that every change is perceptible only from a changeless entity. Therefore, the changeless entity within us has to be that same thing. See, when you say the body changes, the mind changes, how do you recognize the change? How do you notice the change? In a station, when you are standing on the platform and the train is moving, the train is actually changing the position. You are able to notice the changing position of the train because you are standing in a changeless platform. If two trains are moving in the same speed, in the same direction, you don't see the other train moving if you are inside the train, isn't it? Haven't you noticed? Even very fast it can go, but you see it is changeless. Why it is changeless? Because both are actually changing. Both are changing in the same speed, therefore you are not able to recognize. Or you will say that train is moving very slowly. It's not very slow. Yours is going at 50 kilometers and that train is going at 55 kilometers speed. It is fast, but 5 kilometers is what you notice. Therefore you say it is very slow. So changing phenomenon can be understood or recognized from a changeless factor. When you say in your personality, the eyes, ears and the whole body is changing, a moment to moment it is changing, mind is changing. In fact, the prana also changes in the sense. The power of the battery changes in that sense. What was your prana in your childhood is not the same prana now. You are able to absorb certain thoughts very easily when you are a child. Somebody's told you something and you in one go you got it. Now you are thinking again and again and then it is not getting memorized. That is the Udana Shakti is weakened. What you are able to digest as a youth, now you are not able to digest when you are old. The digestive power is gone. The hearing power is gone. So there is a prana Shakti which is functioning through various avenues. That prana also changes. In terms of its vitality, it gets weakened. Prana is changing. Mind is changing. Intellect is changing. Body is changing. All these changes you recognize. So if you have to recognize this, within you there must be one changeless entity. What is that changeless entity? That is called as the real ear. That is the real I. So that pure consciousness within you, which doesn't change, is the real subject within you. And that is imperishable. All these are perishable. Body is perishable is very clearly understood. And death is a very, very easy experience or example to understand this. Mind is also perishable. We are not talking about just the ultimate self-realization where, of course, there the mind and intellect completely perish. Of course, that is also based on the scriptures and our faith and Shraddha that we understand it. But even as you progress, either you evolve or devolve, we see certain tendencies in terms of certain vasanas or certain desires going away from us. To that extent, you have evolved out of it. In that sense, that is also a perishable thing. This mind, where it goes, we do not know. Sleep, somewhere it goes, and then later on, somewhere it comes from. It is going into a manifest and unmanifest stage. In that change also, it is happening. So, all these things are changing, perishing, etc. But in and through all these things, there is one thing which never changes and never leaves you. See, when a person is in a sleep state, is he conscious? Generally we say, when we are awake we are conscious. When you are dreaming, also consciousness is there, but practical purpose you can say semi-conscious. Because something you are conscious, but it is not a full conscious thing. Something is happening within you and your sleep we say unconscious. Sleep is deep sleep. Deep sleep is sleep without dreams. My question is, in the deep sleep state, are you really unconscious? That means you are conscious. Something? What is that something?
The sleep, the deep sleep.
Witnessing deep sleep.
Unconditioned consciousness.
Unconditioned consciousness, which is pure consciousness. When I ask, are you conscious? What is that you there?
Conditioned point, because you're awake. So your mind is merged with your consciousness.
Okay, you are the individual now. I am asking the individual, are you conscious in deep sleep?
No.
No. Right. You are not conscious of anything as you are conscious now or in the dream. You are not conscious of anything, and that state is called as nothingness. Nothingness is absence of anything. That is what is deep sleep. Now, when you are sleeping also, there is somebody who is awake, who is able to recall the sleep after you get up. That means that person is not sleeping throughout. That is called as the real I. That is called as the real consciousness. Therefore, it is changeless even during the state of deep sleep where your mind is not available. See, let us assume a person who has got a accident. He has met with an accident and he has damaged his head. He is in a state of coma for a month, and luckily he revives back. Assume that he has lost his memory. It's possible. It can be a rare case, but it's possible. When he wakes up, what is the first thing he says? Where am I? Okay, if he is not even remembering himself, he says, who am I? Where am I? These are the questions. Suppose he is washed away somewhere, he is asking that place itself, he doesn't know, where am I? Who am I, or who are you, all these people? He is asking all those questions. But the question that can never come out of his mouth is, am I? That he doesn't have. There is an entity I that is always there. that I which he was identifying with, let us say Mr. So and so before that accident, that name, that personality, that he has forgotten. But he doesn't ask, am I here? That question doesn't come, because that it is there. As soon as he is wake up, he is able to understand. Before he met with an accident also, that was there. Throughout the state of 1 month where he was in that coma stage, it was there. That is nothing but a longer and a deeper sleep. That's all. Daily we sleep for 8 hours or 6 hours, out of which at least 5 hours, 4 hours, it could be deep sleep. Whatever be the time, that is deep sleep. Extend that deep sleep to months. Or some people are there who are there for years and they wake up. Recently there was a news, not recently, last year. A person got up from this stage of comatose after 9 years or so, which was in 2015 or 16, 15. After 9 years. And he says he's very surprised to see Roger Federer is still playing. Before he went into that stage, he saw Roger, because it is a very great longevity in tennis to play and be at the top level for so many years. He was saying very surprised. Now he is able to connect with the past. There is a continuity that he is able to establish for himself. So the period in which for all purposes he is practically dead for the external world, where he was not available for himself, at that stage also he was there. He was there. He was there in that pure consciousness form only. But you or me or himself as an individual, he is ignorant of it. That is why we say the deep sleep state is a completely ignorant stage, where you are completely covered, but it is something is there within you, we are not aware of it. That is the real you. That is the real ear. That is the real I. So the master, through this ingenious explanation of ear of the ear, eye of the eye, is actually taking that student to hit the ultimate consciousness within him. That consciousness is transcendental. All other things are terrestrial. Terrestrial means worldly. That which is in the realm of your thought is terrestrial. That which is beyond the realm of your thought is transcendental. So the real subject in you is actually the pure consciousness. This is what this master is coming to. Now, this is just a formula that is derived. It has to be actually felt. No more, any more explanation will only dilute it. You have to just go through it and work about it. It's not going to be easy. This, when we understand about body not being you at the time of death, this subtle body within you goes along with the prana and vasanas and causal body, etc. That goes into the new body later on, and that is called as a birth of the new body. In and through this travel, you are supposed to go through various realms, lokas, according to your karma, they say. It could be Swarga Loka, it could be Naraka, it could be Pitru Loka, various lokas that you go through. In and through all these things, what you remain or what you maintain is that entity called as I. So therefore that I never leaves you. That I is the real personality behind all your vestures. So the answer to that question posed by the student is pure consciousness, and that is what is derived here. And then the master goes on to say, this is very interesting and important, because this is from sadhana point of view. The wise, having completely freed and risen above this world, become immortal. What the master is trying to say by this statement is, all of us are now caught up with this external eye, external ear, external mind, external prana, etc. And we are caught up with the perception, emotions and thoughts which are associated with it. That means, our organs of perception which we consider as I now, we consider I now as this body. We now consider I to be this mind, intellect, this body, etc. This body, mind and intellect is playing with the perception, emotions and thoughts of the world, and it is getting completely involved in it. But he says, the wise having completely freed and risen. So the wise people, what they do is, they get completely free from these persecutions of the perception, emotions and thoughts and rise above it. They are the jnanis. Above this world, pretya asmat lokat amrita bhavanti. They become immortal. That means they become the changeless entity. How to do this? See, what he is saying in simple language is nothing but develop this attitude of objectivity. Opposite of objectivity is involvement. The word objectivity is derived from the word object. We were talking about two things here, subject and object, right? Subject is that which knows, that which experiences, that which is the perceiver, that which is the feeler within you, whoever it is. That real thing is called as the subject. What you experience is the object. Suppose you eat apple, apple is the object. You think of something, that what you think of your wife, that is the object. You are listening to your music, that music is the object. So subject is different, object is different. When subject and object come together, it is an experience. Now involvement in an experience is when the subject gets completely mingled with the object and he is not able to extricate himself. So whatever experience we are going through in the world, we get completely enmeshed in it. So we are caught up in our perceptions, we are affected by our perceptions, we are affected by our thoughts, we are affected by our emotions, we are affected by our actions, everything. So therefore he says, objectivity is to keep the object aside and the subject should move 3 feet back and view it from a distance. So therefore, from the practical point of view, in each and every experience, before rushing yourself and getting yourself enmeshed in that, it could be a relationship, it could be anything. See, the mother gets involved with the child, she becomes one with the child and then she is not able to extricate, and that causes a rift in the relationship, that causes so much trouble there. Or a person gets completely involved in his action, he is not able to view it objectively. If that action is a great success, he jumps with joy. If action is a failure, then he sinks with sorrow. All this is result of your involvement in the action. If you are able to do the same thing with a distance where you are able to view yourself as a third person. Now think about it, that we are able to view everything around us and about us little more objectively. See, if there is a tragedy in your neighbor's house, you also feel sad, but you go and console him and you say, these are all things that will happen in the world. This is part and parcel of life. He is unconsolable. He has lost his mother or somebody and he is completely affected. You are also feeling sad, but you are not completely affected. Why are you not affected? Sorry?
The third person.
You are a third person. You are not into it. You are away from it. To that extent, there is a detachment. So you are able to see that in a slightly objective way. You will be still able to eat. He will not be able to eat for the next 3 days, let us say. You are carrying on with your activities. Though it has a little bit sadness you have got, you continue with your activities. You are able to view the challenge of others. This we have all experienced. But let us say tomorrow the same tragedy affects you. That time, how are you able to handle? It is a different proportion. So, we are able to practice this objectivity to that extent from the outermost circle. Say, some people may get involved in various other layers also. Some people may get involved in a TV serial and get affected. Or get involved in a cricket match. India has lost the match and next one day I am not able to do anything. That means to that extent I am completely involved with the Indian cricket team or various things. Mind has a tendency. So, if you are able to see the match objectively, go to Eden Gardens, enjoy there, jump and dance and do whatever you do there. But at the end of it, you are able to cut it off that this is just a match. That day India won, you are happy. India lost, you are sad, but you carry on with your activities. Okay? So to that extent, you are practicing objectivity. So objectivity is to keep the subject away from the object and do the things. As of now, the mind gets involved in everything and we lose our objectivity. So the formula for success is, if you are able to keep that objectivity, which is a Sakshi Bhavana, this Sakshi Bhavana, it is somewhat easy to practice and to start with from a very external thing outside, from a circle where you are very disconnected. And slowly it has to come to your nearer, dear circle, to your own family members, to your own extended family, then your own family, then your own wife and children, then yourself. When it comes to yourself and you are able to view it completely different from what you go through as experiences, that is real objectivity. But it doesn't happen. The moment our eyes open, it gets involved in the sight. The moment mind experience something, it gets involved in that. So how to do this? It's a brilliant formula given. You may refer to chapter 4, 12 Yajnas, that Swamiji has commented upon. It's one of the brilliant commentaries. What he says is, in whichever perception you are looking at, let us say you are looking at a hill, that is a sight. So the mind has a tendency to get involved in the sight, appreciate the beauty, or say it's boring or whatever it is, it gets involved. In each and every perception, instead of getting involved in the perception, try to think in terms of what makes you perceive. So when you are seeing, one thing is to focus on what you are seeing. Another thing is the formula given here. Try to focus on what makes you see. People say, of course, this is said in a half jest, I want to concentrate on God, I want to think more of God, so I want to go to a very peaceful place like an ashram or something. Why? If you are in a place like Chaurangi or in Bombay or New York, how can you think of God? All the time there is noise, all the time there is so much of disturbance from outside. Why it is a disturbance? So much of noise, so much of people coming and going, is it? Then he says that is the best place to practice the sadhana. Why? Each and every time a sound comes, instead of getting involved in the sound, each and every time that must be taken as an alarm bell as to what makes me hear, what makes me see, what makes me, when you are eating something, one thing is to get involved completely in it and lose yourself. What makes me taste this? If you are able to do this, practically how it will also help. When somebody gives a nice sweet, you say, it's all also Brahman, and you keep on eating it. But you must have the same objectivity when a Karela is given also, or something else is given. It doesn't happen. Why it doesn't happen? We are involved in what we eat. Try to put that consciousness, try to put that attention into what makes you eat. That is why we say that mantra, Brahma Arpanam Brahma Havi, before every meal, because what you eat is Brahman. Who is eating is also Brahman. The offering is also Brahman. Everything is Brahman. Let me remember this if I want to go to Brahman. Therefore, before every experience, it is a thought that what makes this happen. If you are able to switch on that consciousness, there is a chain reaction that is going through all the same process and it hits the consciousness. By doing this, you are not creating any further desires to get involved in the world more. So the wise people who have understood this, Pretya Asmat Lokat Amrita Bhavanti, they rise above this and reach the state of immortality. Immortality is a state of self-realization where there is no more birth and death. This is a mantra that is given here. That which indeed is the ear of the ear, the mind of the mind, the speech of the speech, the prana of the prana, and eye of the eye. The wise, having completely freed and risen above the world, become immortal. Yes, sir.
Sir, on the point of what you see and what makes you see, how does one connect this with living in the moment, in the sense that when you are doing something, you don't become the work you don't think you're working, you become the work itself. When you're singing, you become the music itself.
Huh.
So how does one connect when you're thinking that what makes you see or what makes you sing or what makes you do the work? So how do you connect these two things?
See, ultimately, if a artist becomes the art itself, that is perfect objectivity only. In other words, to the extent that I have this idea that I am drawing, I am speaking now, I am playing cricket. Let us say, and this probably those who have played, they say it, they experience when they play golf. The ball, to concentrate on golf ball is much more difficult. It's because it's here's a golf champion sitting here. There is a stationary ball. In cricket also it's difficult, but it's a moving ball. Moving ball to concentrate is a difficult proposition. But here is a stationary ball. It seems very easy, but you have to go there and see how much we are able to do it. It is there. The what do you call that? Club. The golf club is there, and you have to just connect it and hit it. Forget about target and all now. Just try to connect and hit it. You have to swing and correct. You have to connect it. It's just not possible. So what they do, the experts and all, after they have practiced, etc., their target is some 200 yards away or 300 yards away somewhere. There is a flag, because you cannot spot the hole, there's a flag there. So they calculate the distance, they calculate the direction, they calculate the speed, wind, etc. All this is the preparation. And then you cannot even see there, you have to only focus on this, the ball. Having focused on the ball, you have to see the eyes of the person who is seeing the ball. And finally, when they swing the club in one go, it should go like this. They have to completely forget themselves. Only then the swing will happen. So what happens here is that in the final execution, to the extent that, I have to hit it, or the ball has to go there, all this thought comes, invariably there will be 1,000 mistakes there. It will not go. It can be the greatest golfer also. So, in any activity, it could be a sporting activity, it could be a writing, or it could be singing or office activity, anything, cooking. The moment the lady who cooks thinks that I am cooking and it has to be served well and the children have to be fed well, there will be something wrong. It will not gel with the persons who are partaking. It is not that I am saying they will put extra chili or something. The thought of that I must do good itself affects the meal. It affects the meal. Therefore, to that extent, when the ego is there, that is called involvement. When a singer is singing and he is thinking that it's for the applause or people should understand the nuance of the raga that he is singing or there, to that extent he has spoiled his own music. When does the best music come? Is when he has completely forgotten himself, maybe forgotten the accompanying artist, completely forgotten the audience, he may be even sometimes closing the eyes. Now think about it as to practically when it comes. Okay, let us say a singer is singing Saint Tyagaraja's song, which is on Lord Rama or somebody who is Krishna, he is singing. If he is able to get into the meaning, if he is able to get into the spirit of the song, then he is actually picturizing what the content of the song is, he has become the song. That means the thought has completely gone away from him to the object of the song, which is the real subject. This as an example I am saying. So therefore what... See, what I say, what we talk about real practical objectivity is when the person forgets himself and he performs. Sunil Gavaskar when he bats, Tendulkar when he bats, or Federer when he plays, or somebody who sings, somebody who takes lecture, somebody who is listening, whatever action you do, or somebody who is cooking. When he is completely into it, forgetting that I am doing it. But the question arises, I am saying practically, as to how to forget oneself. Because one aspect of it is constantly remembering us that I am this, I have to do this, I have to do that, I am responsible. This ego is somewhere there. But even on a temporary basis, to forget that to forget that ego, you have to, I am just taking that example of the song so that it's easy to understand, that in that song, if he is able to get attuned to that God or somebody on whom he is singing, that time he has become that thought. So he is not himself. Therefore, that is the time the best of the thing comes. It may not be, see, his voice could be secondary to some other legendary voice, but he will be able to connect and pull the audience at that point of time more because he is not himself. So the moment you are not yourself, you are actually attracting others to you. And this is perfect objectivity because there is no ego present. See, when we talk about losing objectivity, which is involvement. It is the subject which is getting mixed with the object, I said. What is that subject? That subject is nothing but your ego, your individuality. So when the individuality goes away, what comes out is the perfect work. This is from work point of view. Now here he is saying the wise rise above all this involvement and they are just concentrating on the supreme self. Ultimately, that thought of the self, they transcend and become the self itself. So, pretya asmat lokat amrita bhavanti. Once they are completely transcended and they become the ultimate entity, they become immortal. That. Yes, sir.
So, in the deep sleep state, when an alarm rings, is that consciousness which is enlivening the hearing, or
It is consciousness. You are conscious of the alarm, then only you wake up. It is the consciousness which is triggering.
So in deep sleep also we are ignorant.
You.
Now also we are ignorant of that consciousness. So why it is like that?
In deep sleep, it is in the unmanifest stage. Now that ignorance is manifest, that's all. This stage and deep sleep state are different in degree. But in the state of self-realization or turiya, it is a pure consciousness where the ignorance is gone. So deep sleep state is a state where you are not manifest, but it is there in the seed form. Now that seed has grown into a tree and it is manifesting itself. That is the difference between this state and deep sleep state. Yes.
So when you're angry, so then you ask what made me angry. It's the ego. But then you know the answer. It really doesn't.
No. When you are angry,
So it's the mind which is.
it's mind that is playing. Mind is anger. The point is, what makes you shout or what makes your eyes red at that point of time? The moment you are able to think like that, at that point of time, you are free from anger. That's all I am saying. This is an example with reference to any emotion. The practical way to get out of any emotion is to try and intellectualize it. See, when I say this, it is when you want to have emotions is a virtue. It is not that when you are really feeling something, you have to really stop that emotion. No, we are not saying that. If a person is emotional at every point of time, what makes him come out of that emotions is that thought. The moment you are able to intellectualize that, you are able to come out of that emotion. So, what makes you think that? What makes you feel that? Everything is the same supreme power. So, the thought is directed towards the consciousness. The thought which is directed towards all the organs of perception, actions and their respective perceptions, emotions, thoughts, there is a change in the direction. So, you have to shift from the right hand side of the chart to the left hand side of the chart. That is the shift here.
So, I'm sorry. So you said emotion is a virtue, but at the same time, whenever we are seeing anything, we are seeing as a third person. So that means emotion shouldn't come. So how does one balance this?
No. Emotions is a virtue in the sense to be completely unemotional is like a plant. So therefore emotions we do have, and finer emotions are definitely a virtue. What is not a virtue is becoming emotional at every point of time. So if
How do you differentiate between emotional and emotions?
see, when the emotions flow by themselves and your decisions are made on that emotions, that is becoming emotional. In a fit of emotional, you resign something and give. That is not a proper decision. So to have emotions is a virtue. To decide on the course of action of your life based on emotions is not a virtue. That is the difference. We'll conclude with the bhajans here.
Anand Govinda Radhe Gopala Jayananda Mukunda Ananda Govinda आनंद गोविंदा राधे गोपाला जय नंद मुकुंदा आनंद गोविंदा राधे गोपाला गोविंदा माधवा गोपाला केशवा गोविंदा माधवा गोपाला केशवा गोपाला केशवा गोपाला केशवा
पूर्णमदः पूर्णमिदं पूर्णात् पूर्णमुदच्यते पूर्णस्य पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते ॐ शान्तिः शान्तिः शान्तिः